Hey, what's up? Don't mind my voice, I just had a cold, that's all. In one of my older videos, I've said something along the lines of, you can put more eternities in the middle of it and it won't make a difference. This idea didn't seem like it would make much sense to me, so let's try to make sense of it today. Before we start, I'm gonna need you to hit that like and subscribe. I also want you to copy the URL of this video and send them to every single person you have talked to on all of your social media accounts. Send this to your friends, your parents, your relatives, your plumber, your water cooler maintenance guy. Send this video to both Mr. Beast and Mr. Man. Send this video to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane. Send it to the Pentagon. Send it to Elon Musk. Send it to Oprah, I don't know. You see this little girl? Jane is on her knees begging you to subscribe and hit that bell. Look, it's not my fault, blame the economy. If you don't do what I said, let's just say I'm gonna give Jane a lot of something to think about. You have 5 seconds. Still haven't subscribed? You knew it all along, didn't you? That's right. She's immortal. Her head is also bulletproof. My viewers are just too dang smart. What is an eternity? A duration of time of infinite length, without a beginning and an end. Can there be more than one eternity in a single linear timeline? At first glance this wouldn't seem possible. That is until some compromises are made. Here is the first paradox of eternity. Here is a line that represents time, with the past, the present, the future. Both ends of the line stretch indefinitely in opposite directions, representing a single eternal timeline. In the middle of this line is a point. It is an event, where a person named John decides to change his identity and turn into Jane. Look at this for a moment. Do you see the problem here? Assuming that time is eternal, whose beginning and end are infinitely distant from one another, any durations that form inside this line should have a smaller and finite length. Yet, that is not what is shown here. John changes his identity and takes on a different name. He becomes Jane, but before this point in time, he had always been John. He had always been John since the quote-unquote beginning of time. This duration is of infinite length because the beginning is infinitely far away from this point, just like how the duration of time that he takes on the identity of Jane also has an infinite length. You could say that we have just split this eternal timeline in half. Duration A and duration B are only a half of the entire line, which is of infinite length. They should be smaller than the line, yet somehow they both have infinite lengths. We have two eternities, one with an end and one with a beginning. That's simple enough. Now, we are going to add more points to this line. These represent the transitional milestones where Jane takes on other identities and becomes a rock, a butterfly, and a tree. With more points added to the line, we finally have literal, finite durations in the timeline with both a beginning and an end. This is a lot like all existing things that we have experienced in the universe. They are impermanent, changing from one state to the next. Assuming that time is eternal, there should be infinite things that exist inside it, and they all exist in finite duration. In theory, there should only be one eternity. The lengths between the transition points inside this eternal timeline are finite, with a beginning and an end. If, for some reason, the tree maintains its current state indefinitely, you could say that Jane should remain a tree until the end of time, and this duration of infinite length does not have an end. But what if an eternity can become a finite duration? In order for this to happen, another compromise needs to be made. All we have to do is create a number that is finite, but we try to find the biggest possible number that can exist. Essentially, we take the number infinity and subtract it by the smallest number that we can find. You might argue that this should not work, since the number infinity is a concept, or a symbol representing the potential of how big a number could become. Let's for a moment treat this concept as an actual quantity that exists in the universe. Imagine an infinite number of cars existing in space. If you take away one car from the lineup in front of you, you should get a smaller quantity, a smaller number. Infinity minus 1 should still be infinity, but if you treat this concept as an actual number, it should be smaller than what it used to be. You know that it is smaller because the total number of cars in front of you now takes up less space than before, even if the total area of space taken up by the cars is still infinitely big. You know that it is now a smaller quantity because of all the space behind you that the cars do not occupy just got a little larger. Somehow, a literal infinitely big number could also potentially be a finite number. The same might also work if you create a finite duration in time but you turn it into the biggest finite number that can possibly exist. We assume that this duration is finite, so it needs to have an end or a transition point, even if the length is almost infinitely large, and since it has a clear beginning and an end, we could potentially add in more intervals with the same number, a number that is finite but is the biggest possible number that can exist. In a way, this number should be indistinguishable from the number infinity, yet it is a finite number, and this is how you might get more than one or two eternities in a single timeline, or how a finite duration can also become infinitely large. This is how we could potentially have as many eternities in a timeline as we wanted. They would all be infinitely large, yet also finite. Does that make sense? If you didn't say yes, then you would be absolutely correct. If we think about it, a duration of infinite length should go on forever and not have an end. If John becomes a tree for all eternity, the John should forever remain a tree and not become anything else. I would have agreed with you on this if not for the example from the beginning of this video. In the beginning, there was one transition point, and we can clearly see how the timeline is divided into two parts with equally infinite lengths. These two durations were infinite, yet there was still a transition point at the end of the first half. Although the person had spent an infinite length of time assuming the identity of John, there was still a point where he stopped being John and turned into Jane. Can you see where I'm going with this? I'm just going to sidetrack for a few seconds. Assuming that time is eternal with the beginning and the end points infinitely far away from the present moment, it means that the universe has somehow lived through an infinite duration of time in order to reach this point, which should not be possible. If we assume that time is beginningless, then this very moment, this moment right now with me talking to you, this moment with you looking at your screen, should be an absolute impossibility. Yet somehow here we are, sitting here, thinking about life, asking literally unanswerable questions. Somehow we exist, and we exist in the most absurd way imaginable, pondering about how we started and where we would end up next, knowing nothing, without even a handle to hold for support. All we have is this very moment, and we don't know the first thing about it. What a strange existence, a life of contradictions, full of uncalled for surprises. Nothing is known, nothing is certain. All we have is now, whatever it may be. The line indicates that there are potential ways for an infinite length of time to become finite, or that the number infinity can somehow still be a finite number, but we can only see this happening on paper. In reality, assuming that John starts to exist at the quote-unquote beginning of time, he would remain as John for all eternity. We can see how he would eventually take on the identity of Jane, but from his perspective, that turning point is infinitely far away from him and would probably never come. I don't know, it's just a thought. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Thank you for watching. Take care.